Now let's take you to South Africa, where authorities are still seeking answers to, 2 days after 21 underage teenagers died mysteriously at a nightclub, and samples from the bodies have been taken to toxicology labs for further examination. Police said there were no obvious signs of injury, and some claim the victims were poisoned, but this has not been confirmed. Well, as worry and questions grow over the deaths, the family of South Africa's late leader, Nelson Mandela, is calling for all community taverns to close and alcohol to be banned.
Well, let's cross live now to Johannesburg and speak to our South Africa correspondent, Mxolisi Masano, for the latest on this incident. Mxolisi, thank you so much for joining us on the news tonight from Johannesburg. No obvious signs of injury. What's the level of investigation at this time, and what more do we know?
Indeed. So this is at the back of that tragedy that happened in East London, where about 21 teenagers died here in South Africa. Now, this tragedy comes at the back of what was termed to be a teenager's party after they had finished writing their midterm exams. They decided to now, just let off some steam and gather together at this particular party, this particular venue, in which some of these teenagers did not make it out alive. About 21 of them, by the time that this incident actually happened, I was speaking to one of the people who was on the scene, told me that there was about 17, but by now we already have 21 teenagers that have been confirmed to be dead from this particular scene. So the owner of that establishment himself is right now not also giving answers in terms of what actually might have happened to those teens. But what we do know right now is that authorities in the country have decided to close this particular nightclub. They've decided to shut him down. And of course, he might also be facing some criminal charges that will be brought on by the authorities as they continue to investigate and find out what was the exact cause of death that resulted in all of these 21 teenagers dying. What we also do know right now is that speculation is rife around what actually caused the death of these teenagers. Some people who were within the scene say that, pepper spray was sprayed inside the venue, which might have caused the stampede, which might have seen these teens jostle to get to the exit of the venue. Hence, there was a stampede and some of them trampled on one another. And this is how these teenagers ended up dying. And some even say that this was as a result of the establishment not really closing on time, because in South Africa, these establishments are supposed to close by 2 a.m. in the morning. But this establishment was still open at 4 a.m. when this particular scene took place, when this particular unfortunate event happened. So authorities are really trying to gather investigations and let us know what exactly happened. By tomorrow, I think the Ministry of Police will be on the scene as well, just to give some of their reports that they have been doing throughout the course of the week.
Yes, indeed. So, how exactly are authorities likely to react to this call from the Mandela family that community taverns should be closed and that alcohol should be banned? How will the larger communities respond to it too?
Look, I don't think it will be off the back of what the Mandela family says. It basically will be a matter of communities who are fed up in that particular community, because I've really been there in that community. I'm going back as well in the next 2 days to witness the memorial service for those 21 teens. I can tell you right now that communities in that area have been saying that that particular tavern needs to be shut down because it hasn't really been adhering to its liquor license conditions that were clearly stipulated by the South African Liquor Regulatory Authority in the country. So the communities in the area were already fed up with that particular tavern to say that it needed to be shut down. Hence, it was not closed at 2 a.m. when it was supposed to be shut down. It was still operating at 4 a.m. when this particular unfortunate event took place. So members of the community in that particular area are fed up and have been calling for this particular tavern to be shut down. I can tell you that right now, with most members of the community actually welcoming the gesture by the authorities, the South African police, as well as the liquor license body, to shut down that particular tavern right now, because members of the community are actually quite fed up with this particular tavern.
Mxolisi, we've also heard that this incident has raised questions about youth alcohol consumption in South Africa, and of course sticking to safety standards at informal bars such as this, where this unfortunate tragedy happened. President Ramaphosa described it as a tragedy, but beyond that, is this a national problem for South Africa? Alcohol consumption for young people?
Look, I think it's a really double-edged sword. I am a reporter who's always been, on the ground. I've always had my pulse firmly on some of the poorest community of South Africa. And I've crisscrossed these kinds of communities. On one end, when you have communication as well as talks with communities here, you will hear that these teenagers feel being away from home sometimes, being in these taverns, is an escape from some of the harsh realities that they face, that when they're sitting at home, with their family. So they'd rather be having fun out there. And on the other hand as well, we have this issue of youths drinking in the country, which is why exactly the liquor regulatory body has decided to say that since the youngest person who perished in this tragedy was just 13 years old, which is why they feel that it was time for them to take action against the problem of youth and alcohol in the country. So it has been a problem that has been, wild span, and it's been happening within the country, which is why authorities felt that it was time to now address this particular issue. But I can tell you, there's greater dialogues to be had with youths in the country to speak to them and actually find out what their actual problem is, in order for them, why would they be, choosing this time to be sitting at a tavern and drinking instead of being at home? I mean, there was a bizarre account in this particular incident where one parent was saying to me, I did not know where my child was. This is at 3 a.m. in the morning. And why wouldn't you have a parent know the whereabouts of their children at 3 a.m.? So clearly greater dialogues need to be had with the parents as well as the children to actually find out what these problems are, where these problems actually stem from, where you have youth choosing to be in a tavern drinking in the early hours of the morning instead of being at home, sleeping, or being children and using that time to be children because they're still teenagers, you know what I mean?
Right,
so it was a very sad sight having interacted with some of those families.
So Lisa, before we let you go in less than 60 seconds, how stringent really are the laws that guide operations of taverns and nightclubs and all of that, that teenagers as young as 13 are allowed in those places? And what about enforcement? How strong are they?
You know what I mean? With COVID-19 and some of the regulations, we've seen, some of those taverns as well as establishments trying to tighten their grip and adhere to the COVID-19 protocol. But with the COVID-19 protocol now eased up in the country, it will be willy-nilly. It will be all about whether these particular establishments can really stretch, because right now the core matter for them is their profits. And right now, if an establishment feels like the authorities are not going to catch up, it can clearly still trade until the wee hours of the morning and not get caught. That's exactly what they will do, because right now it would seem like with an economy that was brought to its knees because of this global pandemic, everyone is just basically trying to catch up. So right now it would seem like with this incident, authorities themselves have their hands full, really trying to catch up and ensure that they really tighten their grip and ensure that these liquor regulatory rules are tighter in the country.
All right, Mxolisi Masano, a correspondent in South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us.